a good and a bad trait in me and potentially as founders. Like you can be so tunnel vision and so focused, so, also inspired by what you're doing. I genuinely love waking up and doing what I do. I don't feel like it's a job. I don't feel like it's work. Like I love it, but it doesn't mean it's not stressful. And I think that disconnect can be quite dangerous and can lead to burnout. It can lead to all sorts of problems. It should come with a health warning. And so for me, it was the wake-up call was...
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I get everyone to introduce themselves, but actually I thought it'd be quite interesting to try something slightly different. I will still get you to introduce yourself in a second. But I had a wonderful chat with Sue, who said that you had lots of spiritual teachers when you were younger. And one of the things that she said a spiritual teacher said to you was, remember that you've gone up so high, it takes a second to come down. Do you remember this?
Yep, absolutely.
Can you give us some context?
Yeah, so it was when I was 17. I was at school. I was involved with a local youth council in Chelmsford. I went to school in Chelmsford. And they had a campaign. Well, they had a youth voting campaign. It was ironic because I was 17 and wasn't actually able to vote myself, but they were trying to get young people to vote. And so they picked me to be the face of the borough voting campaign. And there's a picture of me with a hand over my mouth, which says, "No vote, no voice." And as part of that campaign, they had this thing where it was went up in a hot air balloon with this big, surreal, these big banners on my face with my hand, like someone's hand over my mouth saying "No vote, no voice," encouraging young people to vote. And at the time at home, we had a guru. The guru actually gave me this ring. He passed away when he was about 106, very, very wise individual. And he just, said to me, "Look, how high did you go up?" And when I was telling him about it, the experience is like, "Oh, well, how high did you go up?" I said, "Oh, really high. I don't know how high, but it was really high." He goes, "Well, just remember that if you let your ego get ahead of yourself and you kind of don't keep it in check, it just takes a second for you to go down and go down lower than the height you kind of went up." And it was just a reminder that to keep your ego in check, and particularly from a young age, because I've been involved in things which had some level of public attention, whether it be the youth council staff or the social enterprise I set up. And it was really important to remember to stay grounded and recognize that this isn't about me. This is about the kind of work that's happening. It's about the impact, and not to kind of get a big head. And so I think it was a really valuable lesson, and something that actually a number of other gurus and spiritual leaders have said to me subsequently, just as a reminder. And I think that's a philosophy that I try and adhere to kind of remain grounded and humble, and not let the trappings of being an entrepreneur or whatever you might read or hear about get the best of you, so to speak.
Are there any practices that you do that you think contributes towards this?
So I'm from a Hindu kind of background, and so I was initiated. So when I actually had a guru at the age of, I think it was 7 when I actually got initiated. So that's basically where you're given a mantra, which is like a thing that, like a phrase that you chant, and you do that 108 times in the morning when you wake up, and at night. It's just kind of there to kind of ground you. So that's one kind of practice, I suppose. The ego thing is more of a philosophical one that just stays with me, and it's part of the kind of Hindu philosophy, where the whole teaching is that this world is an illusion, and the whole goal is to break free from the cycle of birth and rebirth, and to achieve what is called moksha. So where you're no longer kind of born again and you become one with the source. And so ego is like a fundamental blocker to achieving that, because you start identifying yourself as, I am Raj, I am male, I'm an entrepreneur, and you start putting labels on yourself and categorizing yourself in everything which is not really you. It's not your true being and your essence as a pure soul, and you get wrapped up in the labels that society put on you of all these other kind of labels. And that's a big thing around ego, is recognizing that this is all false. Like the trappings of material wealth or whatever is temporary. Ultimately, we've come to this world with nothing. We're going to leave the world with nothing. All you've got is what we believe is karma, and the work you do in your life, and how you lead your life is what goes with you into your next birth. And obviously, if you have led a life where you have been of service, you've done good deeds, the ultimate goal is to not then be reborn. And so I think the whole lesson of ego is just a general thing that stays with me, that in the highs and the lows, to recognize this is not me doing it. Like there is a power or a being or something out there that's guiding me, and these results are, yes, I've tried my best and I might have done something which has resulted in something great, but not to let me get a big head. It's because that's what's meant to be, and I'm on a right path. So it's just generally how I lead my life, which helps kind of insulate me from, I'd say, the ups and downs of entrepreneurial life, because there are plenty of ups and downs, because ultimately I have that surrender and that belief that everything that's meant to be is going to be.
Where do you think the path of an entrepreneur is most at odds with not allowing our ego to be as present?
I think as an entrepreneur, you are first and foremost a salesperson, and a lot of it is, there's definitely the cult of the personality. And I think with social media and the likes, like even more so, like the entrepreneur becomes a brand, and whether it be podcasts, whether it be interviews, it be whatever it might be. And that's just the world that we live in. That is important. It's important in this day and age to get your message out there, to get people to know about you, to know about the business and what you're doing. But I think it's important to then also not get caught up in that and realize that it doesn't matter what people say about you. They could be saying great things about you. They can sing bad things about you. As long as you know that you're on the right path, you're doing the right thing, continue like that. Don't get caught up in it, because that's what's going to lead you to be goes in the highs and the lows. Like people are praising you, amazing. People are criticizing you, oh, I'm really depressed about it. Like, don't let all those externalities kind of affect you. So as an entrepreneur, sometimes I think that is what can deviate you from that path where you get really caught up, like, look how clever I am, look how amazing I am. I've just raised all this money. I've just hired all these people. I've just got these press releases and mentions and all these kind of things. And you just lose sight of, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And then you can just go down this path of, like, which is, there's no judgment here. If that's the path you want to go down of, like, material gains or whatever, that's fine. But also recognize that there's a risk that getting so caught up in what's going on around you, you start believing, like, in the hype, and that can kind of deviate you from potential kind of spiritual path. Obviously, if that's not for you and you just want to pursue, I'm going to be an amazing entrepreneur, make loads of money, and that is all that matters to me, that's fine. For me, that was not the path. It's not the motivation why I do what I do. I personally find being an entrepreneur is a vehicle for social impact and change. So every one of the ventures that I've started had a very strong social impact and a reason behind it to create positive change. And entrepreneurship is just a vehicle to do that for me.
Perfect intro. Before you let us know who is the legendary Raj Dey, MBE now. Congratulations, that's amazing. Although I suppose another thing for the ego, right?
Yes.
Another label, a title.
It
award,
is indeed.
right?
Yeah.
Who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it?
Sure. So I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. I kind of fell into pursuing an entrepreneur path when I was 17. I started with my current venture is a workplace learning platform called Learnably. So we're a marketplace that curates content from over 200 of the world's best professional development content providers. So it could be books, coaching, courses, conferences, e-learning. And employers bring us in rather than employees being subjected to like one e-learning vendor. Instead, they can have access to what they want to learn based on how they like to learn. So it's fundamentally about upskilling people to unlock their full potential and upskill the world's knowledge workers. So that's kind of our mission. But in terms of where it started when I was 17 with a social enterprise called Student Voice around giving school students a voice in their education, recognizing students as the customer in the education system, and, you know, thinking to myself, whilst parents, teachers, head teachers, governors, they had bodies representing their opinions, why was no one asking the end user, the school students, about their opinions? Because they have opinions in everything else. Like a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old can go to the shop and buy some trainers, and they can have an opinion about what they want to eat and not eat. Then why can't they have an opinion about the education they receive? And I actually realized that most countries in Europe had bodies representing the views of school students, and we were one of the few people not to. So actually it was as a result of some of the work I was doing with the youth council and then learning about these other organizations, I got put in touch with Unlimited, which is spelled UNLTD, and it's the Foundation for Social Entrepreneurs. And they heard about this idea that I had to set up a body for giving school students a voice, and they gave me a grant of £5,000. And it was that, which is what fundamentally started my journey down an entrepreneurial path. And I still do believe, now obviously you don't know, if things were different, how things would have panned out, but I still do believe that had they not given me the money, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today, because what it did was it fundamentally enabled me to believe, well, first it showed that someone else believed in me, and it put a sense of responsibility on me, which is, it's all well and good having the idea. Now there's £5,000 in your bank account. And as a 17-year-old, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money even now for anyone, for as a 38-year-old. But it's a sense of responsibility. Like, I now have to deliver. They believe in me, and I don't want to disappoint. And so that then led me down this entrepreneurial path, where subsequently now Learnably is my fourth kind of venture. So Student Voice was the first one. The second one was called Internships, which is a jobs platform for university students to connect internships in startups and scale-ups. When I was a student at Oxford, I found that most bankers, lawyers, and accountants did internships, but if you didn't want to go down a corporate career path, nothing was made available to you at university. Like the milk round, as it's called, probably still is called, was just the big blue chip company. So for you, if that doesn't appeal to you, you kind of feel like there's no other avenue, no other option. And so the idea with internships came out just, whilst at university, running the Entrepreneur Society at Oxford, kept being approached by startups that wanted to attract great talent, but didn't have the brands of a Google and a McKinsey. So it started as a very simple listing site. And then kind of, when I graduated in 2008, it was the start of the graduate unemployment crisis. I wanted to do something positive to help my peers who are graduating get into some form of employment and recognize that actually entrepreneurship is a viable and rewarding career path. So internships was my second venture. And then between internships and Learnably, I co-founded a campaign called Startup Britain in 2010 with four other entrepreneurs, which was a national campaign launched by the government to promote entrepreneurship across the UK. It was inspired by President Obama, who had launched Startup America a few months before, and myself and a few others thought, we need something like this to really galvanize the UK into recognizing entrepreneurship and celebrating it. So, I'd say the kind of golden thread in my career, and my favorite word is the word opportunity, and that's what's kind of been my driving force, which is giving school kids an opportunity to be heard, an opportunity for university students and graduates to experience entrepreneurial life, working in a startup, opportunity to kind of be an entrepreneur and celebrate that through Startup Britain, and now opportunity to be your best self at work through Learnably. So that's, I suppose, the golden thread through all of my ventures.
Where do you think that focus on opportunity came from?
I'd say it probably comes from my parents. So I come from a family where actually entrepreneurship is a bit alien to them. None of them really entrepreneurs, and they probably still don't know what I do, in all honesty. Like, my dad's a doctor, my sister's a doctor, most people around me are doctors. But the whole concept of caring and caring more about society and people around you rather than just about yourself, whether that be in the medical field of like caring for your patients, or my mum has been a very strong kind of advocate for social work and charitable work. And from, growing up, it's something that she'd instill in us, which is, we're in the small percentage of people that are so lucky to have a roof on our heads, to have a warm meal, to be watching TV. A lot of people can't afford that. They don't have those privileges. And so whenever it was, say, Mother's Day or a birthday, as kids, we might go out with Dad and want to buy something from Mum, and Mum would say, well, I really appreciate this gift that you got me, but I think you should return it. Give me that money, however small it might be, £5, £6, and I want to donate it to charity because that's what makes her happy. And then we knew from that point, there's no point buying her a gift. Like, that's not what makes her happy. Giving money to charity is what makes her happy. Philanthropy makes her happy. And I think that's probably where it's come from, and that genuinely also makes me happy as well. So to know that everything that I'm doing in some way can improve society is rewarding in a very kind of different way. But I think the inspiration comes from my parents.
How powerful. I love that. You mentioned how getting that grant during Student Voice has had a butterfly effect on the rest of your career. As you said, someone believed in you early on, gave you that responsibility, and that really laid the foundations for the rest of the career going forward. Now that we've looked back on the journey, are there any other moments which feel like they had a similar sort of butterfly effect?
I'd say it's having the unfaltering support of your family, and my parents and my sister. Growing up in an Indian household in particular, and then the sub part of India we're from, which is Calcutta, so we're Bengali, generally people of that from that community, as is mentioned, a lot of our family friends are doctors or professionals like accountants or lawyers. So they've gone down those kind of professional career paths. And so it can often feel like you're the black sheep within that community when they can't really put you in a box. And maybe now they understand the word entrepreneur, but when I started, they really didn't. And but I think knowing that my parents in particular always had my back and would support us no matter what. So I thought, up until the age of 13, I wanted to be a doctor, but that's because that's the only career path I really knew about. And then I realized actually after that, I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to study for that long. Didn't feel like it would be the best use of my kind of skill set. But my parents always said, look, as long as you're doing something which makes you happy and that you're doing something that's good in the world, that's all that really matters. And that I had their full support. And I don't take that for granted, because when you are starting as an entrepreneur, and I literally, as I told you, I've started things from a very young age. I actually turned down 2 job offers. So when I was at university, I did internships at Bank of England and Boston Consulting Group, and I had job offers from both those places to work, which are amazing places to work. And BCG would hire literally a handful of people every year. But I was able to turn that down. And actually BCG even kindly said they would defer my job for 2 years for me to try whatever I wanted to do in 2 years and then come back to them if I wanted to. But within 6 months of leaving university, I went back to them and said, look, I really appreciate what you've done for me, but I don't want a safety net, because actually having a safety net I felt wouldn't be healthy, because I needed to throw myself into the entrepreneurial path. I didn't want to think, oh, it's okay, I've got a nice, well-paid job to fall back on. I needed to feel that, okay, I've really got to go for this. But I say that knowing that I always had a roof over my head and that my parents would be there to support me. And that's why I said, don't take that for granted. So when we talk about the butterfly effect, I think that is a level of privilege that a lot of people don't have. And therefore, I call that out from the outset, that if I was forced to go and have to fend for myself and earn a salary from day one, and find my own housing and accommodation straight out of university, I probably wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing, because most people don't really earn much, if anything, when they're first starting out. It's like an extension of student life. And so I'd say they were having that support was pivotal in my entrepreneurial journey. And then throughout my career, there've always been well-wishers and people that have kind of supported me, guided me, helped me. And that's been kind of super valuable. And I try and do that too, and give back as much as I can, and surround myself with a great community that we can all lean on each other for support. So yeah, I would say definitely the £5,000 grant was a big catalyst, having the kind of parental kind of support, and then creating a community of peers and fellow entrepreneurs on that journey that I could learn from and take inspiration from also has really helped.
And we'll circle back on the community element, but I couldn't help but think that all of this is accentuated by the fact that you're a solo founder, which is a very different experience than having a co-founder. More so from the emotional perspective, the mindset perspective, those sorts of things you have to be so much more resilient, so much more self-reliant in lots of ways, or so much more proactive with building these support systems around you. Anything else that really jumps out to you in terms of how the life of a solo founder is unique?
Yeah, I think as a solo founder, you need to be very self-aware. I think you need to recognize your shortcomings early on, and to be able to augment yourself with the right people around you to support you on the journey. So I knew that, I'm more of a commercial and a sales leaning founder rather than a technical one. So if I want to do something in the technical space, which, both like my last couple of companies have been tech businesses, I needed to have a strong technical person to rely on. And the other thing is, I'm not a stickler for the minutiae of detail. That kind of bores me. I'm very much the big picture, visionary, get out there, evangelize. And therefore, I've always lent on, with all of my ventures, having a strong COO to be there to make sure that everything is running behind the scenes. And I think recognizing that and knowing that about myself has meant that I've been able to find people with the skill sets that I need to move forward. Now, you would ideally have those kind of in kind of co-founders, but I didn't have that because each of my ventures really started from personal experience and kind of by accident, so to speak, except for obviously Startup Britain, which was a different kind of charitable and not-for-profit initiative. And then the other thing is, it is emotionally taxing. And when you are a solo founder, everything really is on your shoulders in terms of, can I make payroll? Yes, you have a COO. Yes, you have a CTO. You've got, whatever. But at the end of the day, the buck does stop with you. And they're getting a salary. And early on, you may or may not be getting a salary. But the responsibility is immense on your shoulders. And so being able to share that with people that are like-minded or that understand is really important. That's why very early on, I suppose, I've been fortunate to have a really strong community of peers as fellow founders, whether that be the founders community that we're both in, ICE, or Unreasonable Institute, or the World Economic Forum Young Global Leaders community. Like I've been in a whole bunch and continue to be in a whole bunch of communities, which are super enriching, because if there's any problem, I can just put a message out there or on an email or WhatsApp or Telegram, whatever it might be, and people will respond because they understand the journey you're on. Now, if you have a co-founder, it's a shared experience. You can rant and rave to them. If you don't, you need to find that outlet. And so for me, that's been through the communities I've been in.
Let's double click on community. It's one of my favorite topics.
Of course.
What have you found to be the most impactful conversations that you have with people in these communities? As you said, you need to be able to vent, you need to be able to lean on them, they need to be able to empathize and resonate with the challenges. Is there any maybe butterfly effect conversation that you've had?
Do you know, sometimes it's really random things. So I remember, a few years ago at this, I think it was an ICE conference, and in most random kind of settings, actually talking about spirituality, and like with people that you'd never random, like you would never assume would be interested in the topic or whatever. It's funny how you find those elements of commonality. I'm always curious to understand people's why, what drives them, what helps them, what guides them. For me, as we kind of started at the beginning, having a spiritual kind of foundation supports me on my journey. It helps me navigate decision making and deal with the ups and downs. And so having, just understanding from people their insights. Now at the moment, I'm really fascinated around kind of well-being, wellness, productivity, things like that, just learning from other people about what they're doing, taking a bit more of an active interest around investments, these kind of things that historically I've never really paid any attention to, but I like being on this kind of shared journey of learning with people, or even random things that we've talked about, DJing, for example, like learning from each other. So I think that's what I like the most about being in these kind of communities. And then there's obviously the super tactical stuff, which is, how do I deal with this fundraise? Or do you have any advice for like dealing with difficult shareholders, or like this employment issue, or dealing with professional service providers like lawyers and accountants? There's all the tactical stuff, which is great, of course, but there's also the kind of holistic stuff, which there's this phrase that you're known by the company you keep. And I think by surrounding yourself by other proactive, positive, inspiring individuals, it just gives you the fuel to keep going. So every time I come back from some kind of offsite or conference of founders or whatever, I just leave feeling replenished and full of ideas, full of vitality, full of energy, and ready to face the world. Because otherwise, the day-to-day grind can get a lot and get too much, and you sometimes need those opportunities to recharge. And for me, spending time with fellow founders and with other like-minded people is one way of doing that.
Does each different community give you a different specific value add? Because Founders and ICE are quite similar. I'm assuming Unreasonable is also quite similar.
Yeah.
What I can write from is probably the most diverse from the four.
Yeah, so I'd say Unreasonable Institute is kind of looking at kind of impact-led founders. Founders and ICE is relatively similar. I'd say ICE is more kind of tech focused. Founders is more diverse in terms of all forms of founders. And then the World Economic Forum Young Global Leaders is probably the most diverse by kind of geography. It's like fully global. What I love about it is no matter where I go in the world, I can send a message out to the group and say, like, I was in Islamabad for a friend's anniversary event the other day, and I sent a message out and I connected with one of the YGLs that are based there. Or if I'm going to Barcelona or wherever I'm traveling, even in London, like just connecting with other YGLs, it's really inspiring. And the great thing is that they're from all different walks of life. So it could be the YGL in Islamabad has a political background, so she was in government, and other ones might be in sport, they might be in media, they might be in charity, they might be in business. It's so diverse, and so I feel really inspired. And they've generally all made some form of like impact, which is why they've been selected as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum. So it's just great and humbling, that some of the people have gone through such adversity and overcome like huge challenges I couldn't even imagine to be where they're at today. And so I think that's both humbling and inspiring. And just to learn about those experiences and have more of that kind of global perspective.
But the commonalities still, at least with, let's say, young global leaders, focus on impact above everything else. There's this ambition. Are there any other things that?
Yeah, I'd say all of them have achieved something remarkable in their different kind of fields, and that comes with a level of drive and ambition, but also that it has to be more than your day job. I think generally what also kind of makes a young global leader is that it's something that they've done something that goes above and beyond the job that they're paid to do. In some cases, they've just excelled in their professional career, and that's also fine. But in many cases, they've done a multitude of things, and they have a diverse set of kind of experiences and skills. Fundamentally, I think, in all of them, there's a level of energy and inspiration that I get. They have a can-do attitude. Like I'm very aware of kind of energy and kind of conscious of just negativity. Like I don't want to be surrounded by that. It doesn't serve me. And so I just find myself gravitating, connecting more easily with people that have more of a positive mindset. I probably have an extreme positive mindset to the extent where it's annoying to some people might say. I challenge you to give me a situation, I'll probably find a positive in it, no matter how dire. And that's manifested in my own life. And when I've had big kind of health challenges and big health scares, I've looked at the positive in every step of that. And that's what's helped me get through those experiences. And I think that's what fuels me as an entrepreneur.
Can you give an example?
Yep. So in 2020, I was hospitalized with a condition called Cauda-Equina syndrome. It's quite a rare syndrome where you basically lose sensation from the waist downwards. What is happening is that, for me, at least, it was a disc bulge in my spine that was pushing so far into the kind of spinal kind of nerves, and that if it had gone any more, it could potentially have kind of severed the spinal cord and you would be paralyzed. And it's probably the only neurological emergency where they have to operate on you instantly. There's no question about it. So I had actually had back problems for a number of years, basically since the age of kind of 30. And so this was, I think I was 36. And up until that point, I knew I had a disc bulge issue, but no one would operate on me because generally back surgery is risky. There's always a risk that things could go wrong. And particularly when you're young, neurosurgeons don't want to take that risk. But because I'd acquired this condition had arisen, they had no option but to operate. Now, it was about 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning that I realized I'd lost sensation from my waist downwards. Fortunately, with my sister being a doctor, I mentioned it to her. She knew exactly what was wrong. She took me straight to A&E. Bear in mind, this is end of June of COVID, right? So this is the first year of COVID. Hospitals are pretty much in lockdown, one-way systems. No one can go in with you. So my sister could only drop me off at A&E. And she said, as soon as you get there, tell them you've got Cauda-Equina symptoms, because that's a big red flag. And they're meant to treat you differently because they need to get you scanned immediately. They need to get you treated immediately. So I did that, said that, ended up waiting in the hospital for 5-6 hours before they actually ended up doing an MRI. I was okay with that. Like I was just like going, whatever will be kind of thing. And, I was hobbling around with some crutches that my sister had given me. The minute they had done the MRI, they realized I had Cauda-Equina. They were like, you can't move from this. Like, we have to move you around. Like, you just have to stay where you are. And up until that point, I was still hobbling around. No one was saying anything. And then I was kind of so this was around noon by the time this had happened. They take me to a ward. Then technically they should have said to me, you can't eat anything because we need to operate on you straight away. No one had told me that. I was put into the ward. It was lunchtime. They came and gave me food. I was very hungry. I hadn't eaten anything, been awake since 4 a.m. I ate, which meant that they couldn't then operate on me. They had to wait for 6 hours to kind of operate on me. So by the time they operated, it was 11 or 12 at night. But interestingly, throughout all of this, I'm not thinking, like I'm replaying it to you and telling you factually what had happened, but it's our choice on what we choose to focus on and how we choose to interpret it. So for me, the overwhelming sense out of all of this was gratitude. The fact that my sister was there to kind of flag what she thinks has happened. B, that within 24 hours, I had been operated on. The surgeon came back, went home, freshened up, and came back at like 11:30 at 12 at night to do the operation. And that I then made a very kind of speedy recovery. And again, I think a lot of that's with mindset. Like I basically was like, this is not going to get me down. And within 3 days, I was pretty much on my laptop and working. And a lot of people have life-changing side effects from this, which again, they say ignorance is bliss, because I didn't know about this stuff until I looked into it afterwards. But I chose to not focus on the delays, not focus on the fact that I was given food and all of these things, and focus on the fact that I made a recovery, I got operated on, and that solved my underlying health issues. So you can choose to play the victim card and just be negative about it, or recognize that at the end of the day, the outcome was very positive. And the irony in all of this is that I was always curious about my blood type, and my blood type is B positive. So that was kind of the nice kind of thing, which I was, when they were taking my bloods, I was like, can you tell me what blood type I am? They're like, yeah, you're a B positive. So I was like, that just sums me up, right? It's kind of, and that's my motto in life, right? You have a choice in how you focus on the facts, because often you can interpret things in different ways, and you can get yourself really caught up in a spiral with something that is not really an issue. If you just focus on what's a fact versus what is a story I'm telling myself, and then it's a choice on how you choose to tell that story to yourself and how it stays with you. So for me, I'm leaving that whole situation with a sense of gratitude, because, as I said, no surgeon wanted to touch me up until that point. So I wouldn't want to wish cauda equina on anyone, but for me, it ended up being a blessing, because it forced the doctors to operate on me and solve the underlying problem. Because up until that point, there'd be times where I'd be on the floor randomly. Like, I remember I was meant to fly to San Francisco for a conference, and the night before I was just on the floor in my bedroom, couldn't walk. Or I was in the office, this is pre-COVID, again on the floor. I had to literally crawl out of the office to get into a taxi, and then like crawl into the house and just lie in the hallway until my sister came to help. I had horrendous problems with my back, but since the operation, it solved a lot of the underlying issues. So again, I have an immense sense of gratitude, because as a result of that condition, it helped something else.
I suppose the gratitude and the optimism often becomes easier the more time separated from the moment. So I'm assuming while you were crawling out of your office, or crawling into a taxi, or crawling from the taxi to your apartment, you weren't thinking, I'm so grateful for this. Like, maybe you were, and I'm like, wow, that's phenomenal. Is the muscle now in your brain that it's like quite a quick switch when you realize yourself maybe in a more victim ego state, that you then catch yourself very quickly now and go, oh, okay, I'm being a victim here?
Yeah, I'd lie if I said, I'm so grateful I'm crawling on the floor. But the mindset at that point is, there's a reason this is happening. So so it's more about trying to recognize, why is this happening? And to be honest, the reason it's happening is it's my body telling me something. And it's actually took working with a physio who does a lot around cognitive functional therapy, helping you recognize the connection between your mind and the body, and how the pain would have manifests, is that when he's talked me through the troubles and the pains I've had with my back, he's like, if you think back at the times of these episodes, these really acute episodes where you're landing on the floor, what's going on in your life? And when you think about it, when I thought about it, they were periods of immense stress. And so actually, yes, at the time, I wouldn't be like, how amazing, but actually it was happening for a reason. It's basically my body, like, stress manifests itself in different ways for different people. It could be headaches, it could be skin breakouts, but for me, it seems to be back pain. And I think basically it's my body's way of telling me, you need to stop, and you need to pay attention to what's going on in your body, in your life, and get things back in balance. Because I think, again, this is probably a trait of an entrepreneur, is you can be so focused and genuinely, like, as weird, like I never feel stressed. Like, if it's, are you sure? I'm not stressed. I genuinely don't feel it. And this is it, and I'm listening a lot because I'm researching about well-being. There's a lot of talk around chronic stress and around the fact that particularly people that operate in high stress environments, or just like, because I'm just used to it, it doesn't feel stressful, but my body is under stress, and that's actually really bad for you, because you're just continuously acting in this end stress. So your body's just kind of freaking out without your mind kind of helping you realize that. And so I've started to take this more seriously and recognize it more and try and take the steps to look after my well-being and my wellness, because it's not, and I think this is probably a good and a bad trait in me and potentially as founders. Like, you can be so tunnel vision and so focused and so, also inspired by what you're doing. I genuinely love waking up and doing what I do. I don't feel like it's a job. I don't feel like it's work. Like, I love it, but it doesn't mean it's not stressful. It's not causing you stress. And I think that disconnect can be quite dangerous and it can lead to burnout. It can lead to all sorts of problems. And so for me, it was the wake up call was the back pain and moving forward, like trying to get myself in a little bit more balance.
That's one great sort of lagging indicator when your body screams at you that there's something wrong. It does put things into perspective and it wakes you up to the fact that, okay, something about my lifestyle or how I'm living isn't working and my body is really telling me that. What sounds really difficult is when your body is under stress, but your mind doesn't feel stressed.
Yeah.
Are there any other methods you've since realized or used that have helped you become more aware of that stress?
I think it's about developing better habits and routines. So for me, I'm quite a regimented person. Like, I am quite disciplined. Like, I need to plan my schedule. I time box everything. And this is not necessarily a good thing, I think, but what works for me is building in time for exercise, building it, like particularly from the start of this year, I really started taking nutrition a lot more seriously, thinking, like researching, doing tests on kind of microbiome and the gut and making sure I'm eating healthy, and I'm exercising a lot,
Taking hikes.
Yeah. So like doing lots of kind of things to look after my well-being and exercise or maybe meditation, trying to spend more time with family and friends. And I think for me, as sad as that sounds, that needs to be a bit more planned, because if I don't plan it, I'll revert to just autopilot. And autopilot means work. So I need to kind of schedule those things in and be like, now it's this time. It's time with family or it's time with friends. And it's the thing that works for me. I think obviously everyone's very individual. I still think there's work to be done personally. And it's a tough one because, as I said, and you'll probably relate to this, that when you do really enjoy what you do, you kind of just continue. You're in this kind of flow state and you just want to just continue down it, but it can be bad for you. And actually it should come with a health warning. And I think as you get older, I'm going to be 39 at the end of this year, touching 40 soon, your body, you just can't do what you used to do in your 20s. And I've just noticed that in your 30s, your body starts changing. And so I'm just acutely aware of it now. And I'm educating myself more, like I'm listening to podcasts myself on well-being and wellness, trying to get into good habits like meditation and exercise and things.
Your body changes from when you're in your 20s. What about your mind?
Yeah, I'm sure the mind does. I think sometimes you think you're invincible and that you're superhuman. And I think that's where the mind-body disconnect can happen, because you continue operating like you're superhuman. Your body's like, this is probably not right. And it's kind of giving you signals. And if you're not attuned to that, it can cause a problem. I think as you grow older, your attitude towards things can potentially change, and you can, probably a bit more mellow in 30s and later in life. I think in the 20s, like at least I'm talking about myself, you want to prove yourself. You'll kind of go get out there and make a big noise, like make a big splash.
Have a podcast,
do whatever, right? But then afterwards, you're just like, okay, what's the point? Start reassessing the things that are important to you. And, that comes at different stages of life for different people. I'd say in my 30s, I've just got a bit more comfortable in myself and recognizing what's important to me and what's not. And that just helps you feel a bit more grounded.
Well, I can tell. You do feel very grounded, very positive, always bring that fantastic energy, which is why I loved our conversations at any retreat that we've been at, any event with founders. And I think that's something that it's a butterfly effect that you get putting out in the world. And it's very much felt. So I respect that deeply. So going back around to relationships within work, Learnably has been going since 2016, so coming close to 10 years now, which is incredible. It's a long journey, and you've done very well at finding people that complement your skill sets and being aware about what you're strong at, what you're weaker at, and how you can build a really resilient team. You've also done very well with getting incredible advisors on board. Can you talk about how those relationships with advisors and investors have been different, or how you've approached them differently?
Yeah. So with advisors, there's a few different advisors. So the ones that have been with us the kind of longest has been a guy called Stefan Thoma, who's a former global head of learning at Google. He's someone I just connected with when he'd left Google. I read about him somewhere. I just reached out and said, love to kind of have a chat. We kind of connected then. And he's just been a great kind of sounding board for me kind of throughout the kind of Learnably journey. Then we have Renaud Visage, who's the co-founder and CTO, was the CTO of Eventbrite. He's someone I actually connected through ICE. I remember in 2012, I think it was. I can't remember the year exactly. There was a trip to Israel, and I kind of connected with him there. And kind of kept in touch, and asked him to kind of be an advisor when I was launching Learnably. And then Peter Collingridge is someone who's been on that journey from the outset. He was a former VP of product at Safari Books Online. He ran product for the Times and at Citigroup and things. And fortunately, actually, it's come full circle because he's now actually working as a fractional chief product officer for us a couple of days a week. Which is great to actually have him in the business working alongside us. But he was someone that I kind of connected with, again, I think through like an email that I'd received that this Peter is on the market. He's kind of just left an opportunity. He's looking to kind of support kind of founders, and he'd been a founder himself. So there, effectively I got someone in the product space, someone in the L&D space, someone in the technical space. They all had something different to kind of contribute, which kind of formed, when I was looking at the advisory board, like what are the different skill sets that I need? So that's kind of how those three came together. And then more recently, Shelby Wolper is someone who's been a chief people officer at numerous kind of fast growth tech companies in the US, and is someone I connected with through an organization called People Tech Partners, which is an accelerator for HR tech companies in the US. And it's an interesting model because what they do is they pick a few HR tech companies every quarter, and they expose you to hundreds of HR leaders in the US who give you feedback on your business. And the idea is you appoint one or two of them as advisors for your company. So I connected with my advisors through kind of different means, but I think the lesson there for others is to really think about where you need to augment kind of skill sets that you have or that a company has. And then also you need to think about punching above your weight, right? And so to be able to attract people of Stefan's caliber, Peter, Renaud's caliber, helps, when you're an unknown entity right at the beginning, to say, oh, we've got the former global head of learning at Google as an advisor. What was ironic, actually, when we had raised our seed round in 2017, as part of their due diligence, when they were talking to people in industry, they were like, people were saying, oh, you should talk to Stefan Thoma about this and see what he thinks. Now, the irony was Stefan was already an advisor to the business. And so when they were doing due diligence, he was like, yeah, I know these people, I'm an advisor to them. That clearly kind of helped in giving the VC fund Frontline confidence that this is, a good venture to kind of back. And then going to a question about investors, so much of it is on relationships. So my lead seed investor was William McQuillan, partner at Frontline Ventures, someone that I've known before he was a VC, when he was an entrepreneur. He was someone that I just casually spoke to about the idea early on, and he said, look, this is a good idea. Come to me like when you're fundraising. And he was the first person I spoke to. He very early on gave us an offer, and I realized that I don't want to shop this around. Like, I like William, I like what Frontline stand for, and I want to work with these people. And I think that's what's important. Like, money is money, but ultimately it's like, who's giving you the money? Because you need to know, like, are they going to have your back? And with William and Frontline, they've definitely had my back throughout the years. And even when we raised our Series A in 2021, he'd asked me, do you want me to step off the board? Because, I'm very happy to. I know you've got a bigger board now. More. I was like, no, absolutely, I want you to stay because you've been so valuable throughout the journey, and you want to keep those investors kind of close to you, and it goes back to that relationship that I'd had and that trust that we had kind of developed. And then, funny story, it was actually with our last round, which was a kind of a top up from our Series A random LinkedIn connection. So actually, Cliff, the investor, added me on LinkedIn. He'd seen a post that I had with Chris Ye, who's the co-author of a number of books with Reid Hoffman on blitzscaling and the Alliance. And so Chris is someone I'd met through the Unreasonable Institute. So again, it shows you how connections and communities are important. Chris then agreed to do a couple of webinars with us at Learnably, talking about his books. And then Cliff had seen that post on LinkedIn. Cliff was actually a limited partner in Chris Ye's fund. He's an investor in Chris Ye's fund. When we connected, we were at the end of kind of closing our Series A, and it said on his profile that he invests in companies. So I said, look, we're closing a round. Are you interested? And he said, yes, I am. And, he ended up investing both in our A and then a sizable investment afterwards on his own, all through a random LinkedIn connection, which he added me. So it's really funny how these things arise, but again, it's through these kind of connections and serendipity. And but yeah, great ROI on a LinkedIn membership.
We'll get Reid Hoffman on soon.
Yeah, we should, exactly. Get sponsored by LinkedIn.
Yeah. These sounds like really powerful and obviously impactful relationships. They make huge differences in the course of the journey. And so I think the awareness that we have to invest in these relationships is quite clear, at least. How do you maintain the relationships such that they're as healthy as can be?
Yeah, I think that is it's tricky. Keeping your network kind of engaged and active. Now, everyone's really busy, right? So I think no one has expectations that, I haven't heard from you in 10 years. Like, I think what it is it's how do you make that person feel when you're with them, and what are they going to say about you when you're not with them? So we might only see each other once a year, but are you going to think positively of me or not, right? Because then it doesn't really matter if I send you a message every 2 months or 3 months. When I next reach out to you, you're going to take my call or you're going to respond to my email. It's like, why I'm on this podcast. When you reached out to me, it's like, yeah, of course, AJ, I want to support you in anything that you're doing. Like, of course, I'll be here. And I think that's what's important. It's cherishing that moment of connection, making that person feel listened to, heard, respected, and trying to add value in every interaction you have with people. That's what I try and do. And that's actually also another way of keeping your network active is when I meet someone, I'm thinking, is there someone else in my network that I could introduce them to where it would be a mutually beneficial interaction? There's no harm done to me. Like, all I'm doing is connecting two people, and actually if they can gain something from it, that's amazing. And I think networking can often be seen as quite a dirty word, seen as quite transactional and like, give and take. And I'm only going to do this for you if you do something for me. And I think that's really short-sighted, and that's not the way to develop a good network. It's if you can be selfless and help someone, that person doesn't need to help you, but you just need to know that the universe will look out for you, and you will get a random LinkedIn connection that leads to a multi-million-dollar investment. That I truly believe is the case. Is if you continue to put out good stuff and you do stuff in a selfless way, the universe will conspire to help you in any way, shape, or form. And that will not necessarily be the person you've helped, but some random person that you've never kind of met. And as long as you believe in that, at least that's been my experience. But also I think it's important that you don't do something with any expectation. Because I think if you do it, say, I'm going to help you, AJ, because I'm expecting you to help me when I'm calling you, that's also really toxic. And it's really not a good way of because you're just going to set yourself up for disappointment. And also I don't think it's going to be fair or the right thing to do. With your question around keeping your network kind of engaged, finding those opportunities to kind of make those mutual instructions, whether it be, hosting a dinner, hosting an event, opportunity for people to kind of come together and convene, doing email introductions, recommendations, like however that might be, that's a great way of kind of keeping your network engaged.
I love everything that you just said, and also relate deeply to my dislike with the word networking. I've been trying to rebrand it for a while. I don't really know. There's not something that rings true. I don't know if you have any ideas, but I'm all ears. Something around like meaningfully connecting or something. It's like it has a different turn on it, but one to be figured out in due course. Because I suppose when it comes to your network and people, you're connecting them such that they can develop, they can grow, they can progress in whatever they're doing. And I suppose that's still the ethos of what you're doing with Learnably, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So fundamentally with Learnably, the kind of insight was that there's no quality control in professional development. Anyone can be a coach. Anyone can just set up a business as a trainer, set up a glossy website. You wouldn't know any different, right? Beyond doing, if someone says, I want to get better at public speaking, you just Google it and see what kind of comes up. And for me, I felt very fortunate that I had a network of peers that I could turn to for advice and guidance. Okay, I want to get better at public speaking. Who do you recommend? Oh, there's a guy called Alex Merry in our community. We can ask him, or there's other people. And but most people don't have those communities. And it's also very specific to being a founder. If you are a junior marketeer, or you're a salesperson, or you're in finance, you don't necessarily have those communities of peers, particularly if you're more junior in your career. So beyond having an amazing manager, which actually sadly is quite rare, one of the biggest problems in what our clients face is actually first-time manager training and manager leadership development, who might be able to guide you. If you do have a great manager, they may be able to guide you. But if you don't, which is the case of most people, what do you do? And so actually the fundamental ethos and reason behind Learnably was to create this curated marketplace. And effectively the way it first started was I would just compile all the recommendations that were being sent on these emails into a list. And that's how we first got our kind of curation of like, here are some great books for leadership, and here are some things of like having difficult conversations and blah, blah, blah. And that's how actually it started. It was recognizing that I'm very fortunate to have a network that I can call upon. But if you don't have that network, who's going to provide you with that guidance and that quality control? And so community and recommendation has been a key part of Learnably from the outset. So on our platform, you can see what other people like you doing similar jobs to you in hundreds of other tech companies are learning right now. You can see what's trending in the industry. You can see reviews left by people that like you for those specific resources, which is a level of curation over and above an Amazon review, because there's like millions of people on Amazon, you just don't know who they are. And how are you going to trust them? Whereas with us, you know that everyone on the Learnably platform is kind of like you, who is working. Most of our clients are tech clients, like 90% of tech clients. So they're going to be quite similar, right? And so, it's interesting when you say that connection between community, network, and L&D and Learnably, there is a very strong one, because that's the fundamental basis on which I set up the company, and on which it has kind of grown is the kind of social and the network effect that's built into it. Like there's a activity feed where you can see what your colleagues are learning in the business. There's a Slack integration where Raj has just bought this book and AJ is just going to his conference. So you can ask them about it. You can see who in your organization has already purchased that particular resource. it's about that community, but it's a community of learning within the business and within other businesses, because learning is a very social thing. And I think up until this point, learning and development has been seen as a tick box exercise for compliance. And there's also a very kind of old school mentality of like, we must protect our employees. They must only be exposed to stuff from our company because we know best. But actually, in reality, most people, even at work, are probably scrolling on TikTok or learning on Instagram or going on YouTube and interacting with their peers and their friends from all sorts of different companies and walks of life. So why should we just suddenly put them in a silo when they come to work and pretend that we know best? And so very much in our philosophy at Learnably has been to benefit from the wisdom of the crowd, to understand what's trending in the industry, understand people's opinions about different content, and surface up the very best stuff to you so you can learn and grow and unlock your full potential.
I've also spent some time in this space with one of my previous companies, which didn't get anywhere near as far as Learnably did, but it gave me a taste of corporate L&D, but from the other side, not from the consumer side. And you mentioned something which stuck in my mind, which is L&D has been a sort of tick box exercise for compliance. And it feels like one of the things which on the Eisenhower matrix says very clearly important but not urgent, and therefore gets deprioritized, especially when it comes down to setting budgets or specifically in economic downturns. How do you then justify the ROI? I know you said in previous podcasts it's like very nuanced. You can never fully measure it. The same with community. You can never really fully measure the impact. But how do you frame it such that it makes sense for the buyer of Learnably, for whoever is in the company?
I think first and foremost, the challenge is the business being clear on what their objectives are, because often you can tie learning and development goals to business objectives if you're clear on what the business objectives actually are. So I was actually at an event a couple of months ago run by one of our investors, and they were giving an example. I believe it was BT, and they had a very clear use case of where they needed to upskill 300 or so engineers on this new way of doing a certain thing, to enable them to kind of deploy this new technology that they have. And there's a very clear ROI there, right? The quicker we can get these people upskilled, the quicker they can get out in the market, deliver this particular kind of new product or service, right? That's very clear cut. If you think about it, now not every case is going to be as easy as that. If you think about it, people are the biggest cost item in your P&L. Like salaries is always going to be like the biggest cost, right? If you're not investing in them, then you're effectively doing yourself a disservice, because, and there's this kind of quote which kind of goes around, which is that, CFO says to CEO that, what happens if we invest in our people and they leave? And the CEO is like, well, what happens if we don't and they stay? Because effectively, if you're not investing in people and they're not growing, they're by definition stagnating. And firstly, that's not good for your business, because if they're stagnating, they're more likely to look elsewhere and want to leave, because personal growth is one of the key drivers for employee retention, attraction, and that feeling that they are kind of growing in that forward momentum. And in this climate, you can't necessarily promote everyone, but you can help them develop in some way. And that doesn't even need to cost you that much money. You can do that by giving them exposure to different projects, do some work shadowing internally, internal mobility initiatives. It could be through voluntary work. It could be in a whole range of different ways. It doesn't have to be expensive exec education kind of things. There's also the whole thing around AI, right? The fact that it's disrupting jobs. It can be a massive boost to productivity if employees know how to use it, and if you find the right use cases. But you need to upskill your employees to use it. That is an investment, but there's also an ROI on that, because actually if they're saving them 20% time on doing certain things, or if certain tasks could be completely automated, then yes, there is also clearly investment to be made. But I think what it comes down to is being really clear on what are the business objectives, like what is it that we're trying to achieve as a business. And actually, when you're not hiring so much in this current climate, you have to do more with less. You sometimes have to upskill and cross-skill your people to do multiple different jobs. But that needs that level of kind of clarity so you can actually make the case on why you should invest in someone. But the standard kind of rationale has always been is around employee engagement, it's been around retention and also attraction. Like one of the reasons someone goes to join somewhere is they feel they're gonna grow, and if they're not, they're gonna leave.
You've spoken before as well about there's been a movement from talent acquisition to talent activation, which I loved, as previously the mindset of companies solving problems was just hire the person who's going to solve the problem, and now it feels like it's more upskill someone in order to be able to solve that problem, and that's where this comes in. And also keeping people, upskilling them, promoting them internally is so much more cost effective, time and money, than hiring new people in. So then I don't know if you're able to tell me this, but what are the most popular and evergreen lessons that people go on to Learnably for?
So some kind of basic stuff could be on like Excel pivots tables or things like that, right? How to use like basic office skills. It's remarkable like how when people kind of need, it's not surprising because you kind of need it in your day-to-day kind of jobs. So this is some kind of basic stuff. To like, I'd say the big topics are around leadership. And so a lot of our clients are fast-growing tech companies, and they have a lot of first-time managers. So, there's a book called Making of a Manager, which is like super popular. And we've got some coaching partners that specifically work with first-time leaders and managers to kind of upskill them. Communication skills is another one. So public speaking is a big one topic. And now, obviously, we're seeing more interest in AI and how to kind of use it. And so what's interesting, what's kind of great about my job and the work that we do is that we can see the kind of trends, and then we will go out to the industry to find the right partners and providers that are helping people to kind of upskill in those different areas. So some of those things are kind of evergreen. I'd say there was a time where there was a big push around D&I with the Black Lives Matter stuff. There was a big push around that. There's a lot of companies also trying to educate their employees around the importance of DEIB. But at the moment, I would say it's there's definitely an AI kind of era in terms of upskilling.
Just had a quick thought because I read your Forbes article around BAME founders and how it was a sort of spotlight on Melanie UCB, and a bunch of other incredible BAME founders, and just a call out for more support for minority founders and female founders with raising, buying products. So I love that you're putting this out in the world as well.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's hard being a founder full stop, and then being from a minority background, being a woman, raising money, even more, like 10 times, 100 times more difficult. Like the stats are so stacked against them. And partly because there are not that many people like them on the investment side. Now things are changing. Awareness is rising around this, but there's still a whole heap of hurdles that particularly female and minority background founders face. And so I think it's on us all to recognize that and do things to kind of overcome that and break down the barriers that are there for them.
Massive respect for that. And I think every little helps in terms of providing DEI on Learnably and writing for Forbes as you've done, and just having this conversation more is something that I also completely agree with. I feel incredibly privileged to be a white male upper middle class who's grown up in the UK, and it's so easy to not realize the water that we're swimming in it can actually be a lot cleaner than someone else's water.
Exactly.
Bit of a rogue analogy, but there we go. Last bit before we get on to a couple of questions on you, and then I'm conscious of your time, but you've obviously got this entrepreneurial spirit in your blood, and you've had an incredible 20-year career now already. And it feels like you're kind of getting warmed up almost, slash you're in the, you still have a lot of energy and excitement for the journey, which a lot of founders don't have, which I think is incredible. Being able to have that resilience over decades is even more incredible than just going through the pain of running a business. So from your perspective, are there any characteristics that you have recognized lots of great entrepreneurs share?
Yeah, I think the probably cliched, but resilience is the key one. As I mentioned previously, there's going to be plenty of ups and downs, and if you fall down at the first hurdle and just give up, then you're never going to make it as an entrepreneur. And I think that, coupled with relentless optimism, this kind of can-do, proactive attitude, and then the ability to inspire and galvanize people around you. At the end of the day, you are pitching something that doesn't exist most of the time. You need to get finance, you need to get kind of investment often, you'll need to get team members on board, people to kind of trust you and buy into you. So you kind of need to be a great communicator, whether that be written, oral, like all of the above, and pitch yourself and your story. So I think those are the key things that I've seen in great entrepreneurs and people that are genuinely passionate. I think it's passion is infectious. You can feed off someone else's energy when they're passionate about it. But actually, if they're just going in, doing their job, leaving, that's not going to be inspiring. That's not going to attract the investors. That's not going to attract the employees to want to back you, because 99% of the time it's not going to make it. Like the odds are stacked against you, but you might not make this thing, but the next one might work. And that's often what founders find, is that, when angel investors or people are backing you, they're backing you, not necessarily the idea. Yes, the idea is important. And so, if the first venture fails, they're like, sign me up for the second one, because they've seen something in you. And I think that is where the resilience comes in, the relentless optimism comes in. So those are the kind of key traits.
It's actually quite an original list. I really like that a lot. So for the final part, I'd love to just go more into you and as an individual, and also outside of work, which I think is something we don't talk very much about as founders, because the company usually takes up most of our life, and so it's difficult to invest more time. But it sounds like you've been very intentional about that, with time blocking and making sure that you don't have sort of too much space where your default would be to go and work, which I related very deeply to. I feel like I need that a lot more. My default is always work, and that was a bit of a light bulb moment for me. But on to you as an individual. I had an amazing conversation with Sue, your sister, a couple of days ago, and I asked her who she thought had the biggest impact or influence on your life. I'm keen to hear what you thought she may have said.
Oh, I would say it's my parents. Both, I'd say, like, for different reasons. So the fact that my dad came here in the 70s with like nothing, and he's a doctor, and I actually went back a number of years ago to see the village he grew up in, which kind of was so basic. And I was like, how did you even get from there to where we're at today? And like, just so much respect of how he and a lot of people, his generation, his peers, really just created their life from scratch here. They didn't have a community. They didn't have a network, and they had to create that all from scratch. And then he was an anaesthetist, and then a GP, and had a couple of GP practices. And so it's interesting, even though he's not an entrepreneur, there are elements, and with my mum's support, where you had to be entrepreneurial to do what he kind of did. And he always used to say something to me and my sister early on, which was, it's what you do at the end of the day that matters. And that phrase is actually really simple and a slightly strange one, but he would say it kind of all the time. And what he meant by it was that when things are going great, he would say, this is a win, great, but you've still got a long life ahead. There's going to be lots of other things. So at the end of the day, which you can interpret at the time of your death or whatever, it's like what you achieve across your entire life that really matters. At the same time, if things are not going so well, same phrase can help you reframe a situation where things haven't gone to plan. Don't worry about it. It's what you achieve at the end of the day. Life is a journey. There's going to be ups and downs. And so that's a phrase that I think has always kind of stuck with me. And then my mum, it's been around this idea of service and around thinking about more than just yourself, the importance of trying to give back. And hence, I think that the social enterprise angle and the social impact angle in my career has been really, really strong. I'd be curious what she said.
She thought your mum specifically,
Yeah.
Which I loved, but I love how you balance the two lessons from each. I feel like the service element is very consistent throughout your career and this conversation. It sounds like your dad was encouraging sort of a long-term mindset. It's not what happened this year, it's what happened this decade or this lifetime.
Yeah.
And so it puts everything into perspective.
Actually.
Is there anything that you think you could improve on with putting it more into this long-term perspective?
I think generally I don't let things get me down, and also I try not to get caught up in short-term success either. So I'd say I'm generally quite zen in that respect, where I might be excited for a little bit, but then I'll kind of just move on. Like I'll just be like, and life goes on, right? I won't be so caught up in it that, like, I hope at least, and I really hope that people around me kind of keep me kind of grounded. And similarly, if things don't go to plan, because of that saying, like, everything is meant to be, it all happens for a reason. As long as I do my best, I can control the input and not the output. I am not in control of what the end result is. I can only just do my best. And knowing that that's outside my hands is actually very liberating. And so back to your question around, is there anything I could do better and long term? I don't think so, because I feel like I have put everything in perspective, in the sense that I'm not letting anything short term, good or bad, deviate me or get too caught up in it. I think that is where a lot of people struggle, where they fixate on, also they get stuck in the past a lot, where they will kind of ruminate over something that's gone wrong, and then they will just get so stuck down a rabbit hole, and it just doesn't serve them. Whereas with me, generally things just wash over. I might think about it once and then it's gone, right? It doesn't serve me to sit there with negativity, with to begrudge you, to resent you. How does that help me, right? And so I think that really helps me put things in this kind of long-term perspective. We're on the journey. There's still a lot more to do. And just be grateful and take every day as it comes.
Lastly, you work in a building in L&D. It's all about growth mindsets, learning, and also you're leading the company. So the combination of those two worlds, where do you think your growth as a leader will be next?
Every experience is an opportunity to kind of learn and grow. There's opportunities and challenges every day. I think if I think about longer term, where my career may go, because of the health background from my family, my general curiosity around wellness, well-being, I do think like the next horizon for me would be something in the well-being wellness space, I think, because it's the classic era where you can do good and do something commercial at the same time. I'm really interested in the kind of Eastern philosophy and wisdom. A lot of that is coming into the West, and we're seeing that with mindfulness, vipassana, meditations, all sorts of kind of the popularity of kind of gurus on social media and whatnot. And I think there's a lot of wisdom. My sister, she's both a GP and an Ayurvedic doctor. So she's studied kind of ancient Indian medicine, which is like basically one of the first forms of medicine. And I'm really fascinated in trying to bring some of that stuff into the West. So I think long term, I can imagine myself that being an area kind of exploration for me.
What about you as a leader? That sounds like the next venture.
Yeah, I mean, as a leader, I mean, generally, every phase there's a new challenge for me. So developing, for example, my coaching skills is one that I'm kind of interested in. Dealing with like thinking about new partnerships or collaborations or new markets, or like if you're taking Learnably into the US, like everything as a leader, I'm being challenged and I'm having to learn and stretch and kind of grow. So I just see that as kind of part and parcel of my job. Like I don't think there's ever a time where I feel like it's mundane. And actually what's interesting at the moment as a leader is that within Learnably, we've kind of created this Learnably Labs concept where we've kind of forked a subset of the team to kind of innovate and disrupt ourselves as a business. And to do that, myself and the COO were spending like 50% of our time in the labs, 50% of the time in the rest of the business. And some of it is going back to like real basics of understanding customer needs and like design sprints and really going. So actually, it's been such a long time since I've even done that. That muscle memory, kind of really practicing that, and then reading. Like we've got a book club where we'll read different books, like the Mum Test or the book around design sprints from Google and like product innovation, things like that. And so also kind of going back to basics is also an interesting area for me because it's been quite some time since I've kind of done that, and it keeps things fresh.
Good for you. That's amazing. And thank you so much. This has been incredible. The last thing I say is because you've been so generous with your time and sharing your wisdom and experiences, is there an ask that you have that an audience of entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial ambitious people could potentially help you with?
Ooh, interesting. I think it'd be too easy to plug the company and be like, "Oh, no,
lots of people do."
Yeah, so no,
I usually
so
go into more like practical things, like we need support with this specific thing in the company.
No, do you know what? Nothing that kind of comes to mind as such. Like I think generally look out for each other, and like if you can help someone, like in any way you can is what I would say. If someone asks you for some advice, if they ask for the instruction, do whatever you can to kind of help. And I think the world needs help. Like there's a lot of challenges right now. And I think personally, I'm kind of content and I feel really grateful for kind of everything and everyone around me. But for those kind of listening or watching, think about how you can make a difference, how you can impact the people around you. Because ultimately, if all of us, actually, you know, I was listening to a podcast with Robin Sharma, I think his name is Robin Sharma.
Yeah.
And he was quoting, he's talking about like 8 forms of wealth, and he was quoting someone about if you want to be a billionaire, help a billion people. And just reframing concept of like wealth and what we're going to look like. And so for me, that's kind of stuck with me. And so my ask is actually not potentially anything for me, but ultimately, if the world is a better place, it's better for me because I live in the world. And so it would be something where to think about how you can make a difference in the community that you're in is what would be my ask. However small that might be, it might be a random act of kindness, whatever, that would be my ask.
What a testament to you as an individual, and how kind and caring and thoughtful and in service you have been consistently throughout career and everything else. So thank you for everything that you've done, and thank you for coming and sharing. It's been amazing.
I loved it. Thanks so much for having me.